50 people were executed in South Carolina. This is part 3 of the series. David Roachville, December 3, 1999, and Richard Longworth, April 15, 2005, lethal injection. On the evening of January 7, 1991, Roachville and his friend Richard Longworth were driving around in their minivan when they decided to rob the Westgate Mall Cinema in Spartanburg. After entering the theater, Longworth removed his handgun from a shoulder holster and handed it to Roachville. The two watched the movie briefly before moving to the lobby to carry out their plan of stealing money from the ticket booth. While in the hallway, they encountered 19-year-old Alexander George Hobbs. Longworth knocked Hobbs down, jumped on him, held a hand over his mouth, and dragged him outside through a side exit. Once outside, Longworth pinned Hobbs against a waist-high bar protecting the air conditioning unit, and Roachville shot him in the left side of the head. He then returned the gun to Longworth, who placed it back in his shoulder holster. Trying to re-enter the theater, the front doors were locked. The two motioned to 24-year-old employee James Todd Green, who opened the door for them. Longworth drew his gun, demanded that Green open the safe in the ticket booth, and took several money bags. Green informed them that more bags were in his car, ready for deposit, which they also retrieved. Afterward, Longworth and Roachville forced Green into their minivan. Longworth again handed the gun to Roachville, instructing him to shoot Green if he moved. Driving away, they stopped the vehicle, made Green get out, walk 5 paces, kneel, and stare straight ahead. At that point, Roachville shot Green in the back of the head, killing him. Longworth and Roachville were arrested the day after the murders when Roachville led law enforcement officers to Green's body. Following Longworth's arrest, he gave authorities a detailed statement outlining the crimes he and Roachville had committed. Roachville admitted to killing Green but claimed he had been coerced and feared that Longworth would kill him. Reflecting on the events, he stated, "Basically, my crime was I was no hero that night." Roachville was executed on December 3, 1999, while his accomplice, Richard Longworth, faced the same fate more than 5 years later on April 15, 2005. David Roachville's last meal was a beef and cheese pizza and a root beer. He had no last words. Longworth's last meal consisted of a hamburger, French fries, and a chocolate milkshake. In his final written statement, which was read by his lawyer, Longworth apologized to his victims' families and expressed remorse for his actions. He said he couldn't ask for their forgiveness, knowing it would not be granted. His statement included, "I am morally and legally responsible for what happened. I hope they also know how deeply, truly sorry I am for what I have done. I hope my death brings them the peace they deserve." Kevin Dean Young, November 3, 2000, lethal injection. Young was sentenced to death twice, first in 1989 and again in 1993 for the robbery and murder of 35-year-old Dennis Ray Hepler on August 31, 1988. Hepler, who had just begun his first year as an elementary school principal, was working late that evening. As he was leaving the school, Young and 3 accomplices robbed him. Despite Hepler surrendering his wallet containing $67, Young shot him twice, with the first shot proving fatal. William Bell then shot Hepler in the head while he lay on the ground. At the time of the murder, Young had an extensive criminal history and he was on parole. Bell also received a death sentence for his role in the killing, but in 2017 he was resentenced to life in prison. Young's last words were an expression of his faith and his belief that he had been forgiven by a higher power, but not by man. "If I said I was sorry, few, if any, would believe me, so I am not going to dwell on that issue. I asked God, Allah, to forgive me, not man." There are no records of his final meal. Richard Charles Johnson, May 3, 2002, lethal injection. In September 1985, Dan Swanson was driving through North Carolina in his recreational vehicle on his way to Florida when he picked up a hitchhiker named Johnson. The following day, Swanson and Johnson picked up 2 more hitchhikers, Curtis Harbert and Connie Hess, who also went by the alias Julie Smith while traveling along Interstate 95. The group made several stops along the way before parking the RV along the interstate to rest. As Swanson slept, Johnson fatally shot him. After killing him, Johnson and Harbert wrapped Swanson's body in blankets and sheets, tied it with wire, and concealed the corpse in the RV underneath a mattress. Despite this, the three continued traveling in the RV with Johnson driving. Johnson had been drinking liquor and his driving became increasingly erratic and dangerous. Several motorists noticed his reckless operation of the RV and one truck driver called the authorities to report the situation. When Trooper Smalls stopped the RV to question the occupants, Johnson shot him 6 times, killing him instantly. Johnson's last meal was fried shrimp, fried oysters, French fries, chocolate cake, and iced tea. His last words were, "I love you, I'll see you later." Anthony Green, August 23, 2002, lethal injection. On the afternoon of November 21, 1987, Susan Babbage parked her car in the rear lot of the Charlestown Square shopping mall in Charleston, South Carolina. After finishing her shopping, she returned to her vehicle ready to leave when she was confronted by Green, who approached her with a rifle in hand. Without warning, Green shot Miss Babbage in the head, took her pocketbook, and fled the scene in a separate vehicle. An eyewitness quickly provided a description to the police, who soon located and apprehended Green in the vicinity of the mall. During the arrest, officers recovered the rifle and the victim's checkbook from Green's car. Ultimately, Green gave a statement confessing his involvement in the attack and robbery. He had no last words and no final special meal. Michael Joseph Passaro, September 13, 2002, lethal injection. In the midst of a bitter custody battle, Passaro drove to his estranged wife's condominium in Myrtle Beach and parked the family minivan outside. In a horrifying act of revenge and despair, he doused the interior of the vehicle with gasoline and set it ablaze, with their 2-year-old daughter Maggie still strapped helplessly in her car seat. His plan had been to die alongside her in the fire, but when the van suddenly exploded, Passaro leaped out, surviving the blast. When firefighters arrived at the scene, they desperately asked Passaro if anyone was still inside the burning vehicle, but he refused to answer. Investigators later discovered that Passaro believed he would be reunited in heaven with his deceased first wife and his daughter after the fire. Before the incident, he had written a suicide note expressing his wish that his estranged wife Karen would live in pain for the rest of her life. Passaro ultimately pled guilty to the crime and waived all appeals, accepting full responsibility for the murder of his child. At the time of the execution, Passaro smiled, blew kisses at his family, then told them he loved them and that it was over. He had no final special meal. David Clayton Hill, March 19, 2004, lethal injection. On March 7, 1994, Spencer Guerry, the 37-year-old deputy police chief of Georgetown, South Carolina, stopped a car driven by David Hill in the parking lot of a local car wash. Hill was behind the wheel of a silver Honda Prelude with expired Colorado license plates. He did not have a valid driver's license and had Mary Jane in the vehicle. Officer Guerry took Hill's Colorado ID card and car registration and radioed the information to the dispatcher. As he returned to Hill's car, Hill shot him once through the cheek. Despite the severe injury, Guerry managed to radio for help, and Hill's ID card and car registration were later found in the officer's shirt pocket. After the shooting, Hill attempted to manipulate and destroy evidence before eventually calling the police, leading to his arrest. At trial, Hill claimed that someone had been hiding in the back seat and he was actually the shooter. However, multiple witnesses testified that Hill had been the only person in the Honda at the time of the shooting, undermining his defense. For his final meal, all he asked for was a bottle of Dom Perignon champagne, but since that is contraband, his request was denied. He had no last words. Jerry Bridwell McQuee, April 16, 2004, lethal injection. McQuee, seeking money to buy drugs, entered a convenience store in rural Aiken County. He took the clerk, John Perry, to the back of the store and shot him twice in the head before stealing $350 from the cash register. A week later, he also shot and killed his boss. His co-defendant, George Scott, who participated in both shootings and fired the weapon in the second killing, received a life sentence for both murders as part of a plea agreement and testified against McQuee. McQuee's last meal was steak, jumbo fried shrimp, broccoli with cheese, French fries, lemon meringue pie, and iced tea. His last statement was read by his lawyer. "I only wished that things could have been different. I would give anything if only that could have been the case." Jason Scott Byram, April 23, 2004, lethal injection. Julie Johnson, an elementary school teacher with 12 years of experience working with emotionally handicapped children, was attacked in the early hours of May 23, 1993. She was resting on her living room couch while her husband and 3 children slept upstairs when Byron broke into her home through the kitchen window. He initially stole her purse and van, then returned hours later to take a TV and VCR. Upon his return, he confronted Johnson, stabbing her repeatedly with a kitchen butcher knife. Despite her injuries, Johnson managed to make it to the front yard where her husband and the responding police officer heard her final words. She died en route to the hospital. When arrested later that afternoon, Byron admitted to entering Johnson's home and stabbing her to keep her quiet, but falsely claimed that an accomplice named Jim had inflicted the fatal wounds. Investigators found Byron's fingerprint at the scene, and an eyewitness saw him driving a van with blood on his shirt, but he didn't have any passengers. No evidence of an accomplice was ever discovered, and the jury ultimately concluded that he acted alone. Byron's last meal was steak, mashed potatoes, green beans, collard greens, cornbread, banana pudding, cherry cheesecake, apple cobbler, and sweet iced tea. Byron's attorney read his last statement. While I maintain my innocence, I do want to express my condolences to the family of Mrs. Johnson, and I fully understand they only seek justice for their daughter. In the statement, Byron also expressed his appreciation to the SC Department of Corrections concerning his treatment. It concluded with a reading of John 3:16 and the words, I believe. James Neal Tucker, May 28, 2004, electrocution. On the afternoon of June 25, 1992, Rosa Lee Dolly Oakley was in her yard when Tucker pulled his car into her driveway. He spoke with her long enough to ensure that she was alone before drawing a gun and forcing her into the house and subsequently into her bedroom. While this was happening, Joe Black and James Howard drove up looking for her husband and rang the doorbell. Tucker followed Oakley out into the driveway as she began screaming. He pulled her back from the retreating car, dragged her into the house, took $14 from her purse, and shot her twice in the head at close range. Tucker testified that he shot her the first time when she attempted to grab the gun and fired the second shot to put her out of her misery. Following these murders, Tucker went on the run from police and committed further crimes. Between June 26 and 27, 1992, he broke into the Christian Fellowship Church. From June 27 through June 29, he broke into Kenneth Parker's mobile home. Tucker then hitchhiked under trucks until he arrived in Calhoun County, where he broke into Shannon Mellon's house. Armed with a gun, he taped her wrists and ankles behind her back and left her on her bed while he searched for items to steal. Tucker then re-entered the bedroom and shot her once in the head, followed by 2 more shots when she continued to struggle. He wrapped her body in a sheet and dragged it into the woods behind the house, where it was discovered a week later. Tucker stole Shannon's car and was eventually apprehended in Maggie Valley a week later, providing a detailed confession to law enforcement. Tucker was convicted and sentenced to death for each of these murders. Tucker had a long and violent criminal history. At age 17, he had been sent to adult prison in Utah for essaying an 80-year-old girl and an 83-year-old woman. While serving his sentence between 1974 and 1991, he escaped 3 separate times. While on death row, Tucker attempted to escape by threatening a guard with a safety razor blade that had been melted into a toothbrush, but he was recaptured within minutes. Tucker's last meal was pizza, Mountain Dew, and 2 bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwiches. Tucker's attorney read his final statement. To everyone, I have thought of a million things to say, but they can all be summed up like this. To those I have harmed, my abject apologies and regrets. I am ashamed. To those who must remain and deal with this insane world, my condolences. But be of good cheer. Christ has overcome the world. I know that my Redeemer lives. I am leaving this world with a cheerful attitude. Hallelujah. Hastings Arthur Wise, November 4, 2005, lethal injection. Wise was a towering figure, standing 6'4" and weighing over 250 pounds, a former convict who had spent nearly 15 years trying to straighten out his life. Despite this, he appeared to relish intimidating those around him by recounting his past, including time spent in prison for breaking into a house and robbing a bank. For 4 years, he had been employed at the Aiken Lawnmower Ignition Plant, but his tenure ended after a violent confrontation with a supervisor, which led to his termination. Weeks after being fired, Wise returned to the plant seeking revenge. Security guard Stanley Vance observed Wise arrive in his car during the 3 p.m. shift change. Armed with a semi-automatic gun, Wise fired a shot into Vance's chest, severed the phone lines in the guard shack, and casually told the guard, "I got things to do." Moving through a side door, Wise went straight to the personnel office, where he shot 56-year-old Charles Griffith twice in the back. Griffith had been the one to terminate Wise 2 months earlier. From there, Wise advanced to the tool and die area, a section where he had hoped to be employed. He began firing his gun at anyone in his path, killing 30-year-old David Moore and 31-year-old Leonard Filio, and wounding 2 additional workers. Chaos erupted as panicked employees scrambled to escape the gunfire. Wise continued his path of violence, locating 27-year-old Cheryl Wood, who had secured the quality control position he coveted. He shot her in the back and leg before delivering a fatal shot to her head. After this, Wise's movements became erratic. He fired several more rounds, though no additional fatalities occurred. Investigators later discovered 4 empty magazines, each capable of holding 8 bullets. Following the shootings, Wise attempted to end his own life by drinking insecticide inside the plant, but the act only left him ill rather than dead. During his trial, Wise refused to allow his attorneys to call any witnesses who might plead for mercy on his behalf, and he has consistently rejected all attempts at appeal since being placed on death row. His last meal was lobster tail, French fries, coleslaw, banana pudding, and milk. He didn't have any last words. Sean Paul Humphreys, December 2, 2005, lethal injection. Humphreys and his accomplice, Eddie Blackwell, spent much of the day drinking beer together before deciding to enter the Max Saver convenience store with the intent of committing a robbery. Inside the store, Dickie Smith, the owner, politely asked Humphreys whether he wanted anything. Humphreys, brandishing a gun that he had stolen the previous night, replied that he wanted money. Evidence later suggested that Dickie may have reached under the counter to retrieve a gun. As Smith made this movement, Humphreys fired a shot in his direction and fled from the store. Tragically, the bullet struck Dickie Smith in the head, killing him instantly. Blackwell, who had slumped to the ground during the incident, was apprehended at the scene. Humphreys was captured later the same day and immediately confessed to the crime. Both men were tried for their roles in the murder, with Blackwell ultimately convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment, while Humphreys faced the full consequences of his actions. His last meal was a McDonald's hamburger, French fries, broccoli and cheese, oat cereal, and a Dr. Pepper. During his execution, Humphreys looked toward the victim's sisters, Katie Smith Carpenter and Carol Smith Cooley, and mouthed, "I'm sorry." Carpenter nodded in response. It appeared that a tear rolled down Humphrey's cheek after the exchange. William Ernest Downs Jr., July 14, 2006, lethal injection. 6-year-old Keenan O'Malia went bike riding near Riverview Park while his mother cooked dinner inside her apartment. He never came back home. His body was found the next day just outside the park after an extensive search. Downs had only been in Augusta for 3 months, having moved from Albany, Georgia, when he learned he had a son in the area. He saw Keenan riding a bike along a dirt path. He approached the 6-year-old boy and asked his name, then threw him to the ground and essayed him. Then he killed him by strangling him. Downs confessed and pled guilty, saying he deserved to die for his crime. He was also found guilty in 2005 of kidnapping, essaying, and murdering a 10-year-old boy in Augusta back in 1991. Because he was already sentenced to death in South Carolina, Georgia gave him 2 consecutive life sentences plus 10 years. Downs essayed the little boys after they had already passed as well. His last meal was salted cashew nuts, instant French roast coffee, chocolate chip cookie dough, Moose Tracks ice cream, and 3 Mr. Goodbar candy bars. He didn't have any last words. Calvin Alfonso Schuler, June 22, 2007, lethal injection. Schuler had previously been employed by Anderson Armored Car Service and had briefly worked alongside his eventual victims, James J.B. Brooks, James Amick, and Sherman Crozier. Patiently and quietly, Schuler waited beneath a house near Harleyville for the armored car to make its routine stop at a bank. When the truck arrived, he emerged from under the house, pointed a gun at the driver, and shouted for him to get out. Inside the armored car, Brooks attempted to defend himself with only a 5-shot revolver, facing Schuler's SKS assault rifle. Investigators noted that Brooks fired every round in his weapon before succumbing to his injuries. After the ensuing gun battle and robbery attempt, Schuler abandoned the armored car on a back road, having failed to seize any money, most of it destroyed by gunfire or soaked in blood. Brooks' body was later found inside the vehicle. When questioned by police officers and FBI agents, Schuler confessed to both the robbery and the murder. Following his confession, authorities searched his home and discovered abundant physical evidence, including items bearing Schuler's DNA, which matched blood found inside the armored car. He didn't have any last words. He had a last meal of T-bone steak, well done with A1 steak sauce, baked potato, French fries, grape drink, and chocolate cake. David Mark Hill, June 6, 2008, lethal injection. On September 16, 1996, Hill entered the Aiken County Department of Social Services office in North Augusta with lethal intent, opening fire on his family's caseworker and two other employees after he had lost custody of his children. The shootings were fatal, leaving all three staff members dead. A day later, Hill was discovered in a wooded area, having attempted to end his own life. He had sustained a gunshot wound that entered through the roof of his mouth and exited the top of his skull. At the time, Hill was married and had three young children, a 3-year-old daughter who had become a quadriplegic due to a traffic accident, and twin 2-year-old boys. Social services had been monitoring the family amid concerns about the parents' abuse of prescription drugs. Following the tragedy, the children were removed from the home for their safety. Hill's last meal was meatloaf, corn on the cob, garlic bread, a beef burrito, a Mexican pizza, a taco, cake, ice cream, garden salad with tomatoes and ranch dressing, and Pepsi. His last words were, "I sincerely apologize to the families of Josie Curry, Michael Gregory, and James Riddle. I am very sorry for the pain that my actions caused to them. Hopefully, my decision to have this sentence carried out without delay will help you understand the sincerity of my apology and will provide you with some closure. To those of you who have expressed forgiveness to me, I thank you. For those of you who have been unable or unwilling to forgive me, I pray that today will provide you with the peace you deserve." Please hit that subscribe button if you like my channel. See you next time. Bye bye.